Joining me now here on the Knicks Film School pregame show. Behind the scenes, it is about 11:35 a.m. on Super Bowl Sunday. And while the rest of the world will probably tune in to see a matchup between two not bitter rivals, but Andy Reid against his old team, the Philadelphia Eagles, the Kelsey brothers, take place in an inter family rivalry between brother versus brother and the Chiefs and the Eagles. Here in New York, we've got a different Super Bowl to look forward to in the much smaller of windows. And that is New York versus Brooklyn. And it's been very one-sided on the court. Off the court, maybe there's been some laughing going on that we'll discuss in just a second. But the Knicks will play the Nets on Monday night at Madison Square Garden, a very different looking team than the last two times the Knicks played said rival across the river. And joining me to talk about this new look team, he is one half of the Bad Weather Fans podcast. He also has a podcast called Mike Delivers, where he and his wife go around and review different fast food options. Is even fast food options? It could be any options from Uber Eats. Mike?
It's fast food related, and I do that just because I want to make sure the listeners can experience. Like one time, I picked up tilapia from IHOP at 10:30 in the morning for somebody, and I looked at my wife after later in the day, and I said, I have to try this tilapia from IHOP, and that kind of just hasn't stopped since. More traditional items, but that would kind of kicked it off.
There you go. You can also hear him whenever he jumps on with Evan Roberts of WFAN, who was here last time talking about a much different Nets team. He is Mike Bisceglia. Mike, welcome to Knicks Film School.
Thank you very much for having me. Truth be told, I like going on Net shows. I love going on Knicks shows.
Really? Why is that?
Because it's just more. I don't know. It's something about like going in enemy territory, going on to talk Nets and kind of defend the Nets, bring up the Nets. I get a kick out of doing it in the Knick platform. So like for me, I would have more fun if I was the Nets going to the Garden, right, than playing at Barclays. There's something about doing this on a Knick show. I'm pretty pumped to be here.
Well, not to say that there's room for you to defend your team in the conversation we're about to have. I got no jokes here. It's been just fascinating to watch what has transpired over the last, let's just say, 10 days in Brooklyn. Little behind the scenes, John Macri and we do a Patreon pod every week. And 9 days ago, we were going through the league looking for the safest bet to win the title. And we both looked at each other and I just said, like, gotta be honest, is it crazy to say the safest bet is if KD comes back healthy, Brooklyn? And within the hour, Kyrie had sent his trade request.
Of course.
And it was like, oh, never mind. That was apparently ill-advised of us. And I can only imagine what these last 9 days have been for you, a battle-tested Nets fan. Talk me through it. What has the last 9 days been like?
Yeah, I mean, in a weird way, it's been a microcosm of the last 3.5 years of Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving being here. But it was weird because when I saw the news, just like everybody else, that Kyrie Irving demanded a trade out, I was shocked. I'll be honest. I was shocked. But when you sit back and you think about it, it was like I was shocked, but at the same time, not stunned because of everything that has happened in the last couple of years with this team, from Harden to Durant wanting out, then Irving wanting out again. So my initial reaction, shock, disappointment, utter disappointment, right? Like I am a delusional Net fan. I know everybody would say this. It's not going to work. It's not going to work. And ultimately, everybody was right. It did not work. It was a complete failure at the highest level. But I always had this glim of hope, like, here I am as a lifelong Net fan. If Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant are healthy, they have a chance to win a championship. They had an 18-2 spurt where they just looked dominant, couldn't lose basketball games, and were simply incredible. So with all that in my head, it was just kind of disappointment and anger that this team is not going to have a chance to even compete in the playoffs. And from that moment on, I was like, you know what? Whatever the pieces are, whatever the deal is, now I'm all in on just ending this because I can't keep going through these swings of emotion and a roller coaster. And, I'm just happy. I know I'm not going to win a title, but at least I'm happy that I can watch basketball and it just be like normal basketball and normal off the court.
So the anger that you're talking about, I would probably be exactly the same if this had been how it's not even necessarily the last 3 years. And I think you'll agree with me. It's like from the beginning of last season to when the last deadline was. It's the last year and a half, because I think anybody would have looked at how the 2021 season, like you're a shoe size away from being in the conference finals, potentially winning a title. But that anger, is it directed at the players? Is it directed at the management for allowing all this to spiral out of control?
No, it really, I mean, for me, like it stems, I think the snake of this thing at the head of it is Kyrie Irving. I think what his decision snowballed what happened to the Nets. And let's not forget, and I've been the biggest Kyrie Irving defender in situations where I probably should not have it. I'm not talking about from this season, but in the past and everything that has gone on. And I always tried to defend Kyrie. But if you take a step back and you think about it, his decision, right or wrong, how you feel about it, his decision to not get vaccinated just torpedoed this organization because he made that decision. The Nets then had poor management decisions within that. James Harden, although I'm not a fan of his for what he did to leave the Nets, I could at least understand his situation being like, I have got to get out of here. I do not trust Kyrie Irving and I do not trust this management. And it just continued to snowball that, right? Then James Harden asked for a trade. The return for Ben Simmons has been awful. Ben's the worst contract in the NBA. He's been terrible. And then you fast forward a year with Kyrie now in this season and everything that happened earlier with the anti-Semitic video. And then to now wanting a trade. I mean, it has all started from that moment. You're right. But even if you look back beforehand, the year he decided to miss a couple of games. He didn't want to be here. I mean, it was just a nonstop roller coaster of crap. So even though I was angry, like I think I'm coming to a state now where I'm just like, okay, we're the Nets. Here we are. We've got some talent on the roster and we're just a regular team.
Yeah, that's going to be refreshing to be just a regular team.
It is. I'm serious.
Yeah,
it is.
Yeah.
It is.
It's funny. I'm thinking back to that first year because you're talking about the year that Atkinson got fired and Kyrie just like disappeared, and it was like, all right, Kyrie's taking a week off. I guess you can do that.
Well, that was actually the year after.
So it was the second year. Okay,
it was the second year. The first year was the bubble year, and he's like, I'm not going to the bubble. I mean, it just was always something that was brewing and happening. So yeah, that was the second year. The first year under Nash, where he just dipped out and disappeared for moments of time where he would be with political figures. He went to his sister's birthday party. And I was like, you know what? It's okay. It's okay. Because the talent. But the more and more and the worse and worse it got, you just got to a point where it was like, what's going to happen next?
Yeah, that's the crazy part is I think I was also like a defender of Kyrie at that point, that it was like this team understands that the playoffs are what matters.
Sure,
and
exactly.
I'm all for mental health breaks. I think that should be actually encouraged more. And if the NBA is not going to mandate it, that's why I like the load management stuff. I agree. It sucks if you pay to have tickets to go to a game and the players don't play, but this is where the NBA would then have to step in. I'm actually like understanding of it. And then what has transpired since is like, okay, there's at a certain point, there's no defending certain actions. I do want to ask, because this is now the second time in the last decade that the Nets have gone all in. This a much more worthwhile endeavor to go all in on KD and Kyrie. And then I'll even say going all in on James Harden because of what the ceiling looked like sometimes. The Garnett, Paul Pierce, Jason Terry trade that ended up with one playoff series win. They're different, so I can't tell. I'm not going to ask you what's worse because I'm sure it's obviously this. Can you kind of explain how the different feelings are after that? Because it feels like with this, even though it's a bigger disappointment, there's a much more hopeful future ahead. Whereas the other one, when it ended, it was like, oh, we're going to be bad. And there's like, we have no control over our picks as a result.
Yeah. I mean, I think the biggest difference is when that team came to an end, I mean, the talent on that roster was abysmal and they had no draft picks. So you have to think, how do you rebuild a franchise when you don't have draft picks and you don't have any good players, right? And Sean Marks did a fantastic job in maneuvering out of that, where he would take on bad contracts and in return get draft picks. And he turned those picks into Jared Allen, Karis LeVert. He did an excellent job drafting without capital, getting picks, and then doing well with later round picks. So they were coming from a state of just terror on that side of things. This one difference is it was kind of like Fast and Furious ending and it's over now, right? Like, boom, it's all gone. But on the other side of it, the hope that you have for Nets right now is like, okay, they're 33 and 23. So they've done this basically 2/3 into the season. They're going to be in the play, at least the play-in game. They're not falling out of that. The playoffs, we'll see. They're going to have to fight for it. But they've got young talent, which that team did not. Nick Claxton's a budding star. Cam Thomas has shown flashes where he can score well. They added 2 guys in here from Phoenix and Bridges and Johnson that are young players that can be foundational pieces. Now, do they have any stars? Absolutely not right now. But at least from this end, like this is the team that's going to compete, is going to play hard. They played great defense versus the Sixers, but you can see their flaws. But unlike that other team where it was like, they got nothing. This is you ready to be a Net fan? You ready to challenge your fandom? Get out and get ready for Yogi Ferrell being your starting point guard and praying something happens, right? I mean, that's what it was. So, this at least I would say emotionally, this one was kind of just like more of a dagger to the heart, but because of the expectations, but they're in a much better place than they were when that thing ended.
You a baseball fan at all?
I am.
Okay. So the analogy I used the other day to a friend was that, because like I've said this publicly, I know that my face on Nets Twitter has become I'm laughing in all scenarios, but right. I did mention like I really do like what Brooklyn has done, and it's like there's a starting rotation that the Nets have of 2 and 3 starters. It's all 2 and 3 starters. There's no ace, but you've got like 6 or 7 guys that I'd love to have in my rotation, and potentially starting a playoff game, and you go like 7 or 8 deep, like your 10th man at this point, in my estimation, just from outside looking in, and we will talk about him now, is Ben Simmons, which like tell me a worse 10 man in the league. Now, let me ask you, is there a like, how is Ben Simmons as the 10th man in the Ben Simmons experience now that he's I don't see him getting traded anytime soon. And I don't know what the Net fan feeling about Ben Simmons is right now.
Well, here's the problem with what you said, and you could be right. Is he the 8th, 9th best, 10th best player on the team? Like, if you take each roster, you go, yeah, Ben Simmons totally would be my 10th best player. The problem is, I'd argue it'd be hard to find somebody that makes $35 million a year.
Right.
I mean, like Evan Fournier level times 10.
It's Kevin Love. Kevin Love just got taken out of the Cavs rotation, and he's making I think close to $30 million this year. Yeah,
and this is what we got back in the James Harden trade. So that's all the problem. And the issue with Ben on the court has been his lack of aggression. He's not been aggressive. He played 16 minutes last night. Jacque Vaughn played him 16 minutes. I mean, that's barely anything. He had this one stretch where he started to be aggressive earlier in the season, and he looked good. And you're thinking, this version of Ben Simmons alongside Durant and Kyrie Irving, this team has a chance to do something special. But it's become this passive aggressive play. And, I truly think that he's just not in the same headspace that he was 3 or 4 years ago when he was confident. That confidence is gone, and he is a different basketball player. I know he's probably not as athletic because of the surgery, but I don't think that's the problem, right? Like maybe he's not quite as athletic, but it's more of he is just not in the same headspace and has no confidence right now, and it's very obvious on the court.
I think that's why I'm somewhat empathetic to his situation, because of there's clearly something cerebral going on, and I just I don't know what's going on with him, so I don't want to judge it too much, other than like I see what's on the court, and that's what I will judge. And then you add in the physical part of this. He's not the same player, and there's a history with the NBA when it comes to back injuries that can seriously affect the version of the player you saw pre and post said injury. But I know that the Ben Simmons thing is polarizing, I guess. Or is it polarizing, or is it more unifying among Net fans?
It's unified. I mean, Net fans are really disappointed in it. And like we can think back to how we got here, and it's Jared Allen, Karis LeVert, Taurean Prince, and a whole bunch of first-round draft picks that go over in a trade. Nets get back James Harden. Harden's then swapped for Curry, Drummond, and of course the centerpiece Ben Simmons and a couple of picks. But you think about all of that from where they were to where they are now. That stings. And that's kind of like if you're going down the highway and you're talking about the Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant wreck that has happened to the Nets franchise, like this one is kind of like on the outskirts where you're just on that side road, but there's still traffic and it's still just as annoying, and it still just has really hurt this organization. And I think that played some part of it as well for Kyrie being like, I want out of here. There were reports he was frustrated with Ben. And I can't blame him. Yeah.
One of the things that, and like you heard the interview when I talked to Evan about the culture change. And look, it's less about like Nets culture and like the reason Kevin Durant said he wanted to come here. It's way more that as of 2019, and this is, I guess, so we can get into some Knicks Nets stuff.
Sure.
That was really like the first time that I had to not necessarily take the Nets seriously, but like for years it had been the Knicks are so clueless. If they ever got cap space, they'd get free agents coming in. Then the decision happened. It's like, all right, well, maybe it didn't work out this time, but someone will finally choose New York and choose to go there. And then in 2019, it was like, oh, someone did choose New York and they went to Brooklyn instead. And I'm curious what the long-term effects of that is, because as disappointing as this run ended up being, I'm positive there are young basketball fans that their first basketball memory was Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, two of their favorite players, going to Brooklyn, and they wore those jerseys, and it made them Nets fans going forward. Although I am curious what that number is. Do you think that in this era of, because we're older, we grew up rooting for a team, and then the players on that team became our favorites. Younger basketball fans today, they fall in love with players, and then wherever you go, I follow. So do you think that this helped in like cultivating more Nets fans going forward, or it's like, as Katie and Kyrie left, did the fan base that came with them also go with them?
I'm sure it did help a bunch. I mean, it had to have those kind of stars and a younger player. I mean, you see more net gear than you ever did, in the past. Now, what kind of long-lasting implications does that have? I have no idea. It has been interesting. Barclays Center, the last couple of games without the stars, with this new roster, has been much louder, much more energetic, and much more engaging. And it just feels as if the fans like are caring all of a sudden, or the people that are there because, maybe the ticket prices have gone down a little, are into it. It was kind of strange. I'm like, you don't have there's points with Barclays where they have the stars and it's quiet. Now here you are with this like scrappy, young, feisty defensive team, and it's been more energy on the from the fans, which has just been kind of weird to see. If you think about it, doesn't make sense, I guess. But I do think there's going to be more added Net fans. I think that's kind of happened 10 years ago when they moved to Brooklyn. I'm not one of the people that come on. I'm not one of the Net fans that are going to be like, oh, the Nets are taking over the city. Like, I'm not stupid. There's more Knicks fans. Give me a break. But I will say, I think it would be silly to think like the Nets haven't, made a dent in that or added to their fan base. It's definitely bigger than it has been before, and it's only been 10 years. It'd be like if you went to, well, it's a little different because there was baseball in the NL for a long time, but like in 1972, if you walked over and you're like, there was Twitter then, and people were fighting on Twitter, you'd be like, oh, the Mets are taking over the town. You'd be like, no, they're not taking over the town. There's more Yankee fans. They've been here forever. They've been here for 100 more years. But you can see that the Met fan base is still growing. That's why I'm kind of curious, like in 60 years from now, what will it look like? I have no idea.
Yeah. Given there's a planet, and so, believe me.
Well, those, yes, most important.
Yeah.
And both of our teams will still not have titles. That I can promise. Say
the Knicks will still be trying to battle out for the 6th seed, and Tibbs will still be, playing Julius Randle and Jalen Brunson over 40 minutes.
100-year-old Tibbs. That would be awesome.
We'll be still running the same ISO offense too. I need to ask about Cam Thomas, and I have some questions about some of the pieces that you like the most, but those 3 40-point games to then go back to now, like you could tell me because you probably watched the games closer, the 20 points against Chicago and then 14 last night against Philly. what do you make of this player? Because I'm box score scouting mostly, and I see these three offensive games happen, and it's like, oh, I guess this is now Cam Thomas's team. And then, the new guys show up, and he's relegated to a different spot in the rotation. What do I make of this player?
Well, they were so void of talent in those couple of days because of trades. They had nobody on the roster. So Cam Thomas put up a lot of shots, but he was efficient. Don't get me wrong. He played really well, and it wasn't just like he took a million shots to score 40. He was clutch. He was fantastic. He wasn't getting much run early in the year, and I won't even say like, oh, because Kyrie was ahead of him. Kyrie's so inconsistent if he would be there or not. It was his lack of defense, his lack of passing. Those two didn't get him on the court, and Steve Nash couldn't figure it out. Now, they've unleashed Cam a little bit, and he can go off and score. But for him, he needs to show those other aspects for him to get that kind of playing time that I know a lot of Net fans are hopeful for. But when they were so void of talent, it was like, you've got to play, and he can be unleashed, and he has the ability to get buckets. When he's hot, and he was hot in those 3 games. He's definitely not going to be like, he's not a 40-point per game guy right now. Like that's crazy town. But now with the added pieces, he came off the bench last night, which was interesting. Is he a guy that can get you 15 to 20 off the bench and just be a high volume scorer for a team that needs offense? That's where I think I'd love to see him flourish. But unlimited, I guess, ceiling, because he's still just a baby. He's only been in the league his second year. He's 21 years old. So we'll see where he goes, but he's definitely not, I wouldn't say if you're a Knicks fan, you don't have to be like, oh, the Nets got themselves the next superstar over there in Brooklyn, and he's just waiting to erupt. I think they have a nice player that they found at the very end of the first round of the draft that's going to be a good player. I don't know if he's going to be 40-point per game guy, but I think he can be efficient and helpful.
Well, I was wondering even like 25-point per game guy, and is that, you mentioned a line in there that what Net fans want is there an outcry for more Cam Thomas minutes or a focus more on his usage?
I do think so. I mean, in particular, like last year, he didn't play. I mean, he wasn't playing at all. And then, a little bit this year as well, when you saw that game versus, the Indiana Pacers where he played, or for example, last year versus the Knicks, it's like this guy doesn't play. Then he comes in games and he's taking over. So there is wanting to see more and more of it, which is understandable. I don't know. I would put it this way: 25 per game on a bad team, 16 per game on a good team. Like if he's scoring 25 to 30, that team's probably bad, which is what the Nets were, especially when it was him, Clax, and nobody else on that roster.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. I guess maybe it's similar to like a Kevin Porter Jr. when he was having those crazy scoring games a couple of years ago before they got Jalen Green. It was literally after the Harden trade was made. Who do you like the most out of who you got back? I'm a big Mikal Bridges guy. Really wanted the Knicks to take him instead of Kevin Knox, but where do you stand?
I love him. I mean, he's been awesome. It's been so refreshing too to hear him in the post game, to hear him when he got traded, just like a nice guy that's energized and happy, and which is so refreshing after the last couple of Nets years. I love his game. He's only continuing to get better. His defense was great yesterday. You could see him and Cam Johnson switching on James Harden. They did the best they could. I really like him as a player. He's under contract for a couple years. He's gotten better in scoring each year, starting at 8, now at 17, which I think is going to take another leap now with the Nets, who need scoring. And I think they got themselves a nice player. I mean, there was a report that the Grizzlies offered the Nets 4 first-round picks for Bridges. They said no to it, which I'm glad they did not, because I want to, even if Nets are going to win a championship this year or next, I just need to see good basketball. Like I need to have a regular year under my belt before we go into full rebuild mode. I just need okay, I know they're not going to win. I know it's probably smarter to get more draft picks, but I just need a year of regular Nets, like regular 44 and 38, and they lose to the Bucks and no one cares. I need that. But yeah, to answer your question, I'm really, really thrilled with Bridges. I like what he can do on the defensive side, and he's a good 3-point shooter. And that, he was great in his debut. Missed the one shot we needed at the end that would have given the lead. But he joked about it after on Twitter. It was kind of funny with LeBron James bending down, being tired. It was, so far so good. And excited to see how he does in the Garden on Monday.
we'll see how he does against his old Villanova teammates, Jalen Brunson and Josh Hart. So I'm curious because you said you love to go on Knicks podcasts and you host a podcast with a Knicks fan.
Sure.
And I'm curious, like I usually get the temperature of out of town people of what they think of the Knicks, and no disrespect, but the Knicks come up twice a year for most of the people I talk to for this podcast. They're in your market. And so you've been inundated with the Knicks probably your entire life and having to have a thought about them. What do you no holds barred, your honest feelings? How are the Knicks doing? What do you see across town and what the Knicks are building?
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, I've been a Net fan my whole life. My first Nets game, I was like 10, 11 years old. I saw Drazen Petrovic drop 44 against the Rockets, and I said, this is what we're doing. 10 minutes from the arena, this is it. I love it. I was hooked. I was like, the Knicks in the Garden just didn't appeal to me. Just loved all that. Yes, and now doing a podcast with a Knicks fan, Alex and I get into it, and he loves the Knicks, and I do not. So it always brings that out of me, and getting to see this, on a day-to-day basis. I'm probably more positive on the Knicks than he is. I think the Knicks are headed in a decent place. Jalen Brunson is a steal, obviously, in what they got for him. I don't qualify that as the Knicks getting a free agent because basically they got somebody with his daddy on the team. So I understand it's not like a big get, but he's been awesome, right?
Yeah.
And to Julius Randle's credit, I thought he was unplayable after what happened last year. He has reinvented himself again to become an all-star. So I like the Knick pieces. Now, the problem with them is I don't know if they have direction where they can be a championship team. I don't think there's really anything around them that makes you think that. But I would say they're a good 44-win basketball team, maybe 45 wins. The issue is the East is just so damn good. I don't know from a direction standpoint, where are they going next? That would be the part, if I'm a Knick fan, that I'm worried about. But like in the moment, be happy. They're playing well. They beat good teams. They have a bad loss here. Again, though, what is the ceiling for this team? Because Brunson and Randle are good, but you're not going to go to the next great level. RJ Barrett right now has gone backwards, I would say, overall this season. And then, add Obi Toppin to the mix where the Knicks just strike out again on another first round pick. High lottery pick is a problem. But Leon Rose is drafted well late round with Quickly. I as someone that absorbs the Knicks kind of as a sponge from everything that is around me, I think the Knicks they're a good team. I just don't know how they become great.
Is that your assessment of Obi, by the way, that they struck out, or is it that they just haven't figured out how to use the player?
Well, I think it's a combination of both. I mean, we'll never know because he doesn't play. Yeah. But at the same time, I mean, the big part of it is, and I don't want to be the guy that's like, oh, the Knicks passed on Donovan Mitchell. They didn't make that like all the teams passed on Donovan Mitchell.
Yeah.
This is different though, because the Knicks had a void at point guard, right? The Knicks had a void at point guard. Now, if they draft Tyrese Halliburton, they're probably not Jalen Brunson. Jalen Brunson's probably not on the roster. I don't think that happens, and they're a different trajectory. But to me, that was a strikeout. Now, it's a little different than Kevin Knox. It's a little different than Frank Ntilikina, where they played and didn't get run. I guess to me, it's ultimately, I'll say a bust, because I don't care if it's the Knick organization or it's the player. It's just not working. So it isn't.
The example I used with I was talking to a couple of the people that work here about how much do we put on Obi? How much do we put on Tibbs? How much do we put on the front office in that situation? And it's almost as if if Obi was a teacher and he went to, the thing he was good at was teaching history.
Okay.
And then the school hires him to be the math teacher. And it's why are all your students failing math right now? It's well, I'm not a math teacher. I'm really good at this other thing. And they're just not. Yes, he could go out and become a really good math teacher. He has the ability to go learn math, and he, to his credit, was asked to be a floor spacer when he came here, and he's improved his shooting significantly since he's been here. And some of the defensive rebounding has gotten better. He's never going to be elite on that matter, which is why I'm curious if the Josh Hart thing helps. But Obi's a rim running transition highlight reel, and the Knicks run this slow paced isolation offense that requires him to be a floor spacer. He can learn how to be good in that role, but it's why it wouldn't shock me if the next team that gets him tries to dive deeper into the guy that was at Dayton, the high flyer, or it also wouldn't shock me if he just like is a backup and we find out, oh, okay, so maybe he just like the things that he's bad at actually do supersede what he's good at. And, the Knicks, weren't able to utilize his skills offensively. But Obi is so polarizing around, not even polarizing, but it's the Obi Tibbs thing around Knicks fans that just gets so polarizing at a certain point.
Well, I mean, the issue is, when you look back at it, I don't think they expected Julius Randle to be an all NBA second team player. Exactly. So he ends up having this career year, franchise level guy playing where he's incredible. Then he gets to the Hawks series and everything changed last year and he's back where he's having all-star level play. I don't think they expected that because you're going to draft a guy that went to college for 4 years that is an older player and older in NBA terms where you're going to come in, you've been at school for 4 years. There's no real like sitting and waiting and developing for 2 years. You've got to come in and play. And now Tibbs, and you correct me if I'm wrong on this, but his stubbornness to play Randle and Obi together, he's not on the court. He's getting between 8 and 12 minutes. And it's like, it's just not going to work. Like if I'm the Knicks, just trade Obi, get something back now, say it was a mistake, at least make your team better. Because if he's just going to sit there, it doesn't make sense. Either play him and it fails or trade him, get assets back and you say it didn't work out. But to be kind of stuck in the middle here is odd.
It's why I'm more positive than negative on just about everything with the Knicks. I think they've overachieved from my expectations before the season with the roster. You mentioned Julius, like the commitment to just redefining what his shot selection is, I think is why you're seeing the improved numbers and output that he's been this year. Mm-hmm. I'm higher on the coach than a lot of this fan base is. I'll tell you that much. I don't think he's perfect. I think there are things that he is actually very bad at. And you just mentioned one of them, the need for 48 minutes or however many minutes of rim protection that they end up playing will cost them when teams go small. And it's why I also am curious when these teams go zone, if he's able to just be like, I don't know what to do. I need rim protection. And then as far as the front office is concerned, I think they've been better than they have more good than they have been bad, but the things they are bad at are very glaring. And Obi is an example of that. Like you said, you had a spot at 8th overall to take a point guard. Could have taken Halliburton, a guy that actually would be perfect, a driving point guard that would get to the rim endlessly, perfect for Tibbs. And you chose a CAA client that, like you went with what you were familiar with that William Wesley is apparently very high on. So, it's back and forth in finding the things that I like and finding the things that I am still frustrated about by this franchise. But overall, I'm glad to hear that it's more positive from your perspective about the Knicks. I mean, they're winning basketball games. They beat the bad teams. They sometimes beat the good teams, and then they do the other thing on the other side. Well, to me, as crazy as this sounds, but going into Orlando and beating the Magic, where a young team has played really well of late. Mm-hmm. It's like 18 and 12 in the last 30. Like that was a really good win going in and getting that. Beating Utah at home. They're getting these wins and they're piling up. So it's hard to ignore. I would just say, I hate it. It's annoying. I hate to see the Knicks have success. I don't like it, but I'd be lying if I was going to be a hater and say they're not playing well. My big critique would just be like, what's next? How do you get them better? And I don't know if there's an answer. So I struggle with that question too, because man, it's so clear they thought this summer was going to be the Donovan Mitchell summer, and all of their eggs were being put in a row that summer 2023 is when they'll go all in on a deal. They would have RJ able to match the money. He's the guy that you send out. You'd have all these other pieces if you wanted to do so. And it happened a year early when some of their assets, like Julius Randle, wasn't an asset in any way. You'd have to sell off that guy. And now, if you did want to use Randle in a trade for a superstar, you can. And I think that's what makes me hopeful that I don't see who the player is that they'll eventually trade for. I know there's a couple of guys I don't want, like Zach LaVine or Karl-Anthony Towns, that I just don't think are worth going all in on. Yet, I think their assets are much better if they were to potentially go that route and trying to improve the roster with one big swing. And look, you said it before about it's probably the smarter move to trade Mikal Bridges for 4 first-round picks. The heart wants what the heart wants. And 2 years ago, it probably was the smarter move for the Knicks to trade Julius Randle when he was playing like an all-star before the extension, so they could pivot to Obi Toppin and get into the Cade Cunningham lottery sweepstakes. And like that would have been the smarter move, and trust the process and all that jazz. And yet that was one of the most fun seasons the Knicks have had in my life. And I'm kind of enjoying this season. Like Josh Hart last night became a hero because he like played 27 minutes off the bench and grabbed 8 rebounds. Like that's how low the standard is for just confident basketball play. Look, as far as the Knicks Nets rivalry is concerned, I would like to actually beat your team once, especially now that the big guys are gone. You going into this game as we wrap up, are you confident that streak will continue, or are you worried about the Knicks? I'm
always worried that when they play the Knicks, I don't like losing to the Knicks. But it's been nice to beat them 9 straight times, over the course of how many years it's been fantastic. I'm always a little bit worried. I mean, this is going to be a tough game for the Nets, right? They're going in against a Knicks team that's got continuity. I know they added one player, but for the most part, it's the same roster. The Nets are still trying to figure themselves out, still trying to get the pieces together. I mean, they've got 4 new guys that have come onto this roster in the last 2 days. This will only be their second time playing together. They did, for the first time together, they looked good versus the Sixers. They had no scoring at the end and couldn't win the game. But I'm definitely always a little worried. I don't like. There's definitely a sense of relief though, in a weird way. Like if the Nets did lose to the Knicks, I wouldn't feel as bad about it as maybe I would have had when Durant and Irving are out there. Like to me, that was the case where it was like, no excuses. You cannot lose to this basketball team under any circumstance. Now it's like, I guess I could be more understanding of it because of where the Nets are and they've changed, and it might not bother me as much.
I gotta say, my assessment of the trade is it sounds like you share it in that there's a lot of young, exciting pieces of a team worth rooting for. Mm-hmm. They're not going to win anything like significant, but I think it's like almost exactly where the Knicks are, where there's like some young guys that you'll like, and Jalen Brunson has found money, and honestly, at this point, Julius Randle has found money, and like the bad contracts are like it's Jalen Rose, it's Derrick Rose, and Evan Fournier, and that ship has kind of sailed, and that no one's causing any. They're the veterans on the team that get to kind of shepherd over this younger group. So yeah, we're all both kind of in the same boat, but at least
I would see that.
At least hopefully this game is on Monday. So maybe that is what sucks, is that you're back down to the next level of 0 expectations, but hopefully a fun watching experience.
That's basically it. I will say though, going through the storm that was the last couple of years, makes this. It's only been like 2 days, so don't I don't want to make this seem so hyperbolic, but like this idea, it's just kind of refreshing. Like, okay, at least this is it. Let's hope we can make the top 6 and have some fun. And that's I guess that's what all the Knicks fans are saying too.
It's quite literally the motto of this season. Like, you know what? Maybe we get the top 6 and have some fun. That's so about it. Mike, you've been great. I appreciate you giving me the time on Super Bowl Sunday, especially since I know there's some other stuff that we won't mention going on in your life. That
you could. It's all good either way.
Well, just your wife is expecting, and at any moment this podcast could have ended because you would have had to rush someone to the delivery room. I appreciate that didn't happen, and I wish you the best of luck over the next couple of days.
I do have 2 missed text messages, but I think I think somebody I think if we had to go to the hospital, I think my wife would have just walked in the room and said,
let's go
get the bags.
Yes, exactly. Before you go, hopefully it doesn't happen in the next couple seconds. Plug what you'd like to plug. Tell everybody where they can find your stuff on the internet.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I do a Net Nick podcast called Bad Weather Fans with me and my buddy Alex Benezowitz. We have a fun time doing it, and it makes for an interesting show because I'm a Nets fan. I don't have no problem admitting I dislike the Knicks. He's a Knicks fan. He has no problem admitting that he dislikes the Nets. But we have a mutual respect for each other, which I think makes it fun. So yeah, check it out. Bad Weather Fans. We've had some fun interviews like Richard Jefferson, Tracy McGrady, Chris Childs, Kerry Kittles. And Meta World Peace recently joined us, so we have a fun time, some cool interviews. And if you wanna hear someone from the other team, put down the other team. If you just want to hate on the Nets, feel free to join and listen to hear me cry. It's all there for you.
There you go. Hopefully I would say, like, hopefully it's not too much crying, but I do hope Monday night that there's a hint of it. You know,
I get it. I respect it.
Yes, it's been, like you said, 9 straight times. Haven't beaten the Nets since the pandemic. So this
feels like this has to be it, right? Like in your head right now, you're going 9 straight times. They've got a whole new roster. It's at the Garden. Knicks are playing well. They're playing good basketball. Like this has to be it, right? In Knick fans' heads going, this has to come to an end.
See, here's the problem. Last year, that Cam Thomas game at the Garden where the Knicks blew a 28-point lead, that I thought had to be it. And it ended up being rock bottom. That completed a 3-17 stretch for the Knicks going into the All-Star break. I thought when I came back from vacation, everybody would be fired. And instead, it was just like, all right, we're back to the lottery, like business as usual here at MSG. But yes, I am hope this is absolutely the best chance they've had. No Knicks fan they've had so many weird streaks. They didn't beat the Nuggets for like 20 years. They didn't beat the Nuggets in Denver for like 20 years. They didn't beat the Raptors in Toronto for like since Linsanity. And now it's like, all right, the next streak is because it's not just beating the Nets for the first time in 9 tries. It's beating Ben Simmons for the first time ever. So crazy. I would like both of those streaks to end on Monday night, and we'll see what happens. It's very weird stat. Mike, you were great. Thank you for joining me.
Anytime. Appreciate it.